Hi folks, this is Jim at your Jiffy Customer Support Network. In this segment we're going to cover the proper procedure for changing the throttle control on the Jiffy PRO4 propane powered ice drill. Anytime that you're looking at doing repair work or replacing certain parts on the Jiffy model PRO4 propane powered ice drill, you're going to want to take note that there are two different generation PRO4 units, and depending on the repair or the replacement, you're going to want to make sure that you identify which generation PRO4 model that you have. If you're replacing the carburetor, or if you're replacing the propane fuel delivery system, or changing out the throttle control, these are specific ones that there are different steps to completing the procedure for those replacements. So you're going to want to make sure that you identify the unit that you have. The two generation models are shown in the video here. The first unit on the right is the first generation, and it's identified by noting the aluminum fuel line that attaches the carburetor to the regulator, shown here in the video. Again, that's the first generation PRO4 model. The second generation PRO4 is shown here on the left, and the first thing you'll note, the absence of the aluminum fuel line, because the carburetor and the regulator are attached directly by this brass fitting. That's the major difference between the two models, but it does create specific differences in the steps taken in the procedure of replacing those particular parts. So you want to make sure you take note of that. The first step that we are going to take in changing the throttle control and cable on the second generation Jiffy model PRO4 is to remove the throttle lever from the operator's handle on the spark plug side of the unit. This is easily done with a medium-sized Phillips screwdriver, and all we're going to do is unscrew the retention screw that holds that throttle lever on until that throttle becomes loose. Let that fall down beside. The next step we're going to take is to go ahead and remove the air cleaner system. First of all, we remove the air filter cover, then the foam element, then we'll go ahead and remove the air cleaner backplate by removing the retention nuts. We want to set those aside because we want to use those to remount everything after a while. Once we get those off, the next step is to remove the retention clip, and then we'll slide the air cleaner backplate off. At this time you'll note that the air cleaner backplate has a breather tube mounted to it, and it's also mounted inside the cylinder, and you'll want to just pull that breather out of the side of the cylinder hole. It's just a press fit in there. Then the next step we're going to want to take is to take the control lever and feed it through underneath the engine, between the engine and the regulator. And the one thing you want to be careful in this process is to make sure you don't overbend the throttle cable or put a kink in it. And once we get that through, the next step we want to take is remove the throttle wire from the throttle lever on the carburetor. You just open the throttle by hand with your thumb, and then just with a needle nose pliers just remove it from the slot in the pivot post. Then the next step is there's a jam nut on here that holds the throttle cable in position. We just want to loosen that jam nut. And then just take the cable and turn it clockwise until it unscrews out of the mounting bracket. To install the new throttle cable, the first step we want to take is the threaded end of the throttle cable and screw that back into the mounting bracket on the side of the carburetor. And as you screw that on, you're going to see the threaded end of the cable start to come out the top of the bracket. And all you want is one thread of that end of the cable to come through, and then you're going to want to retighten that jam nut that we loosened before. That's the proper position for the assembly of that unit, or assembly. And just tighten up that jam nut, and that's back in its proper position. The next step we're going to want to take is to go ahead and assemble the throttle wire back into the throttle lever on the carburetor. And you'll note first of all that there's a ball shape on the end of the throttle wire. That throttle wire fits in this pivot post on the throttle, and you're going to want to note that there's a wider opening that this ball fits into, and you want to make sure you've got that to the top where this ball fits into as you reassemble it. I'm just going to take a needle nose pliers, and then with the use of my thumb just open the throttle lever, and then fit that throttle wire back in that slot, and the ball fits right down inside that fitting. And then all you want to do is just take the throttle lever on the other end of the cable and just operate it and make sure everything functions properly. The next step we're going to want to take is take the throttle lever and route it back underneath the engine cylinder between the engine and the regulator, and again being careful not to overbend or kink the throttle cable. Get that through properly. Then the next step, we're going to slide the air cleaner backplate back in position, and we're going to take that breather again and push it back into the side of the cylinder. And again, that's just a press fit, but you want to make sure you push it in there nice and tight. Then we'll take the retention clamp for the air cleaner backplate, put that in position, and we want to go ahead and put the retention nuts back on that hold the backplate in position. Tighten those up nice and snug. And we'll want to go ahead and put the foam air filter element back in position. And then eventually the air cleaner cover back on. The next step, we're going to route the throttle wire underneath the black propane hose and also underneath the mounting bracket for the propane tank, and get that back up in position so we can mount that back up on the operator's handle here on the spark plug side of the engine. And again, just tighten up that retention screw to tighten up the throttle against the handle so that's nice and snug. And then one last check, we just want to operate the throttle and make sure that everything operates and functions properly on the carburetor. That basically concludes the proper procedure for changing the throttle control and cable on the first generation Jiffy Model Pro 4. If anyone has any questions or concerns regarding this procedure, please feel free to contact us at either of the two locations noted on your screen. I'd like to take this time to thank you for your continued support of Jiffy products and the purchase of your Jiffy ice drill. Thanks and have a great day.